Sal Internauta here for recordonline.com. I'm here with Times Howard record columnist Kevin Gleason. Talk a little bit about the search for a new coach at West Point after Rich Ellerson was fired on Sunday. Kevin, seems to be the same four candidates at the beginning that we thought. We have guys with Army backgrounds, Ohio State offensive coordinator Ed Warner. We have Jets special team coach Ben Kotwika, and we have Tampa Bay Bucks offensive coordinator Mike Sullivan. And then we have Georgia Southern head coach Jeff Monken, who has some Navy background under Paul Johnson. Interviews should be going on Friday. We have you talked about Mike Sullivan getting an interview on Friday.
Yeah, Sullivan, well-deserved interview. He was a little bit part of the search for the last time Army made a hire with Rich Ellerson. Mike, I believe, at the end pulled his name from the candidacy when they were just about to hire Rich. So I know Mike, is Army true and true, a former Army Ranger, loves the academy, a graduate, played Army football, and is this former assistant Army coach. So he seems to have all the qualities that it would take to further the Army mission.
Yeah,
I think the only question with Sully is, exactly the X's and O's and the day-to-day coaching and running the offensive scheme. Exactly, how in tune he is with that. But he's an offensive coordinator in the NFL, so that's something that certainly I would think he'd be qualified to do.
Yeah, find a way. I know that in 2008 when Rich Ellerson was hired, he was one of the last guys considered. Right. So he's back for another interview, and like you said, with the academy background, I gotta think some of the pro stuff can help out a little bit because, like you say, with schemes and stuff like that you're dealing with, maybe Army needs to, alter its offense a little bit. Maybe it doesn't have to be predominantly a triple option offense. Maybe it could be a little bit of a read type of offense, and maybe I'm sure he's dealt with that in the NFL. So
no, there's no doubt about it. He has a pretty sharp offensive mind. He went from coaching Eli Manning as the quarterbacks coach of the Giants to coaching the Bucks as offensive coordinator. And he has 2 rings with the Giants, and one of them obtained as a wide receivers coach with New York, and when they won the first title of his tenure in 2007.
Yeah.
And then he was the the quarterbacks coach in 2011. So I think he has a great offensive mind. The thing when I think about Sully and why he makes such a great candidate, I just think of him being a guy who can go into living rooms and come out with a talented player. He is that type of guy. He has an infectious personality, really, really sharp, class act. He's just a real guy, and his personality will come through, I think, in the sense of bringing recruits in.
Well, we talked after the Army-Navy game on Saturday when Army suffered their 12th straight loss. We talked about how recruiting has to get better.
Sure.
So, that's part of it. Let's talk a little bit about Ben Kotwika now. He's the Jets special teams coach. Captain of the 96 team, the 10-win team, most wins in Academy history in a season. Again, a younger, fiery, maybe version of Sullivan.
I have a soft spot in my heart for Ben because I covered him in 96 that year as a co-captain on that team. And, he's just such an interesting and impressive guy.
Yeah.
He did several missions in Afghanistan and Iraq as a helicopter pilot. He's done a great job with the Jets. I know he's looked upon very favorably in New York in the Jets organization. And he's another guy who, you talk about that guy who can, bring recruits in, I think it would be Ben.
Yeah.
And, Ben's obvious question mark surrounding him is not having been a coordinator at any level other than the military academy prep school.
Yeah, he was there for 2 years as a defensive coordinator at the prep school, and I remember talking to Steve Anderson. You've talked to Steve Anderson about Ben Kotwika.
Sure.
Steve Anderson, 2010 senior with bowl game win, and Steve swears by Ben Kotwika.
Yeah, I think Ben would be one of those guys who would grow into the job. And I think we have to kind of look at is whoever they hire, can we expect next year to be a 7-8 win team? I don't think we can.
Yeah.
You hate to say it because Army's fans and Army's endured a lot of losing, but you can't expect this to be a one year fix, a 1 year project. This is going to take a couple years to get this thing turned around because they have to bring better players in.
Well, the athletic director, Boo Corrigan, says on Sunday after he dismisses Rich Ellerson, he says he wants a coach that can hit the ground running. Now, does that mean a coach? Well, if you look at a guy with head coaching experience, the only one of the top 4 candidates is Jeff Monken at Georgia Southern, and he's done a great job at Georgia Southern in his first 4 years. I believe he has 38 wins in his first 4 years, and he beat Florida. They finished their season with a win in the Swamp against Florida, who had a down year, but still, it's a win. It's an FCS school winning at Florida. That probably doesn't happen ever, And
only 16 losses. No, he's had a tremendous run at Georgia Southern, and he's the type of guy who, like, you look at him, he kind of fits a profile real well in terms of hitting the ground running, I should say, because he's already had success as a head coach.
And he's recruited for Service Academy football before under Paul Johnson's staff. So, I mean, there shouldn't be that much. He'll know what kind of athlete he wants, and he knows what kind of athlete he'll need to look at and get at West Point,
Absolutely.
I think that is my top non-Army candidate is Monken. I mean, now they got to decide whether they want to hire an Army guy or do they want to – they haven't hired an Army guy. A West Point grad, which would have been Kotwika or Sullivan since 1959, Dale Hall. It's been a while. Do they want to go off a little bit and hire a Navy guy? With Paul Johnson's, from the Paul Johnson coaching tree.
Right. Now, the only other guy that you didn't mention that we've talked about is Ed Warner, the co-offensive coordinator at Ohio State and former Army assistant who also was very interested in the last Army opening. And I think Warner. I think Warner's another good offense coach, and like you were talking about today with Warner, with his experience as major college assistant, he can go in, and there are certain territories that he has presumably has a really good handle on. You think about Ohio, and Ohio can be a pretty interesting area for Army.
Which has
athletics. That's their demographic.
They haven't recruited Ohio well at all.
They haven't done it well, but that's been a demographic that they have recruited well in the past. So that could be a strength of Warner's being able to go in and get those types of players.
Remember, he was an assistant at Notre Dame too, so I mean that's a national. You're recruiting nationally at Notre Dame too.
Look at Ohio State. His experience there. So he's a guy who I think really highly of him as well because I remember him as an Army assistant. I thought he was very impressive.
Now the thought is, no matter who they pick, like say Sullivan would be their choice. Now we've talked about this. Could you bring in Ben Kotwika as a I don't know if it's a coach in waiting, but as a coordinator just to get he's never coached at the college level before.
I know Ben. I know Ben really would prefer being a head coach. I don't know. I can't pretend to know if Ben would go for something like that.
Yeah.
That would take a lot of brokering, and typically when you hire a head coach, you don't do that. It's generally you hire a head coach and he picks the staff. I can't think of any instances where something like that would take place where you'd basically be hiring, the head coach and a coordinator at the same time and asking them to work together. But, stranger things have happened, and this is a unique set of circumstances when it comes to
you never think of a coach in waiting at West Point,
No, you don't. And, and you never think of a head coach coming in with a coordinator. Or already intact, from hired that way separately, So, I don't know. I'd be surprised if something like that were to take place. But to me, it's in many ways it's an ideal situation, to have, I think, Mike Sullivan maybe as a head coach and Benny as a defensive coordinator.
To me, Army needs as many West Point grads as possible on their staff. I mean, I'm not saying it's got to be loaded with West Point graduates, but it's got to be loaded with quality West Point graduates who've played here before, who've coached here before, and if you can, like you said, if you can get Sullivan and Kotwika, even though he coached at the prep school, still just how he was a captain of the most successful team. That should be a pretty good sell too. Warner. If he was head coach, who would he bring in? Now I talked to somebody connected with Kansas, where Warner was an offensive coordinator, Mark Mangino, and they had one of their most successful years when Warner was there, 12 wins, and the person at Kansas suggested that Mangino, if Warner got the job, would come and be the offensive coordinator
Yeah.
at Army. I mean,
That I would like to see. You know, you don't dismiss anything
Yeah.
in this game here.
yeah.
But you know that would be a bit of an upset, I think, if that happened. But you know, hey, you don't look past anything. You have to investigate everything.
I think the possibilities are endless because Boo Corrigan talked about spending more money on his coaching staff, spending more money on just on the football program in general. We looked it up before, and the coaching staff combined, head coach and about 11 or 12 assistants they have, made less than $2 million last year.
Yeah, that's bizarre. You know, you're talking about maybe an average of like $100,000 a year for a coach who's working about 150 hours a week. You know, so it is. It's just bizarre. And that's part of the institutional commitment that needs to be made. You know, spending more on coaches and I'm not going to beat up Army for that because I know they're working hard on that and they're working on dedicating more money to coaches and whoever the next coach is, he's going to be. I'm sure he's going to be making much more than Rich was.
Yeah, only 400,000, a little over 400,000 for Coach Ellerson this year. They want to spend money to splash. I mean, I got the feeling that they wanted to make a splash here. I don't know if that is going to be available. I don't know if that coach is going to be available.
And I don't know if that's always the right coach. They made a splash with Bobby Ross, and it didn't work out. The big name, the guy who's been to a Super Bowl like Bobby was and who led Georgia Tech to a co-national title, it didn't work out. And in the end, part of it was his lack of energy, that he was wearing down. So, no, I'm not big for the splash. Like, I'd be perfectly content, and if I were an Army fan, I'd be content with a Monken or a Sullivan or a Kotwika or a Warner. I really would.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, we're hearing interviews are going down this weekend. Sullivan will be Friday. Kotwika will be Saturday. And maybe Army has a decision early next week. And they got to do it pretty much before Christmas.
Yeah, if you don't do it before Christmas, you're talking about next weekend, really.
Yeah, so hopefully Monday, maybe latest next Friday. Check out recordonline.com, Varsity 845U. Kevin Gleason will have his columns. I'll have my coverage and my blog. And we'll talk more Army football down the road. Thanks for joining us.